Hello guys, I'm starting my first video today. Don't make fun of me. It is St. Patrick's Day. I am in green. You are in my basement right now, so hopefully you can be okay with me being in this hole down here. I don't usually go into the office very often except to work by myself, so I'm inviting you in. Behind me is a boron drum because it's St. Patty's Day, and that's one of the drums that they use. And over here is a picture of John F. Kennedy, who's a famous hero of the Irish. In fact, if you go into Irish houses in Ireland today, a lot of times you see a picture of the Pope, and right next to it is a picture of John F. Kennedy. That has nothing to do with anything. You guys are going to start your e-learning, and we're going to get through everything. You've done the hard stuff with Romeo and Juliet, all the way up to Act 3, which is where you had homework for Monday, and you guys all sent me your homework. I am going to try to communicate with the lesson part just by videotaping and posting them on Classroom. And then if you have questions, then you just email me, send me a message on Classroom, and we'll go from there. Hopefully we'll get everything taken care of and you'll be good. I will try to cover what I'm going to cover when I give you the assessment. And yes, you will have a test. So, we're just going to pick up where we left off because we can, because we're honor students, and we will move on. All right, so I left my book at home. This is a junior book, but I've got the stuff up on the computer, so I'm just going to kind of go back and forth for Act 3, but let's give you a couple of things. So Act 3 starts off after the marriage that's been in secret. Nobody knows about it except Romeo, Juliet, the nurse, and the friar. So you've got those four people who are involved. Mercutio, Tybalt, Benvolio, Mr. and Mrs. Capulet, and Benvolio and Montague. None of them knows what's going on. So when Romeo comes out from the wedding, he and Juliet go separate ways, and they're waiting for the wedding night to climb up on the rope ladder and have a great time. And then I guess they have no idea what's going to happen. Now, in a typical Elizabethan tragedy, it's 5 acts. Act 1 is exposition, where you set up characters. Act 2 is rising action, where you get into the major conflicts. And Act 3, the one that you have for today, is the climax of the play. It's when, everything explodes. And in this case, it happens in the afternoon. After they've been married, it's really hot and tempers are flaring. And the beginning of that scene starts with Benvolio and Mercutio having a discussion. Benvolio and Mercutio are, of course, joking around. It's hot. Benvolio wants Mercutio to get out of there because he doesn't want to be out if the Capulets show up. And Mercutio, typical jokester, is like he doesn't really care if the Capulets show up. He'll stand his ground no matter where he is. So as they're standing there, Mercutio begins to joke with Benvolio, basically characterizing him as a hothead. You are, super, super ill-tempered, and you start a fight with anybody, which is complete irony because Mercutio's the one who starts fights, typically. I'm just trying to go through. This is just some of the lines that he gives. He says, you get mad at people. You got mad at somebody because they were coughing and your dog was asleep in the street. And didn't you get mad at the tailor for wearing his new doublet before Easter, his new jacket? Girls, think about one of the rules in American society. If you've been brought up a certain way, at least my Southern upbringing, you don't wear white shoes before Easter. That's the rule. This is kind of the same thing. And Mercutio is kind of mad at Benvolio, characterizing him as an evil sort of fighter. And Benvolio is nothing like that. Then all of a sudden, Tybalt comes in, and Tybalt is looking for Romeo, but of course, Mercutio is kind of joking and kind of angry at the same time. Tybalt doesn't have time for Mercutio, but Mercutio, again, always needing to be the center of attention, tries to slam Tybalt. Tybalt says, "Hey, can we speak a word with you?" And Mercutio says, "Why don't you couple that a word with something else, make it a word and a blow?" Like, he's ready to start fighting now. And Tybalt tells him, "You're going to find me apt enough of that, sir, if you will give me occasion. So if you give me a reason to fight, I will fight." And they begin to pawn off of each other. Tybalt tells Mercutio, "You consorts." Think of a consort or a concert, right? He says, "Are you making us minstrels because we're hanging out together?" And then they get a bit mad, and Benvolio jumps in and says, "Hey, this is out in the public, and everybody can see. Let's just go inside and talk soberly, or forget it, get out of here because everybody's watching us." And Mercutio's like, "I don't really care." When Romeo comes walking out of church, Tybalt says, "Well, peace be with you, sir. Here comes my man." He uses the word man the way we talked about a man is a servant. And so Mercutio says, "I'll be hanged, sir, if he wear your livery," right? If he's gonna be wearing, like a servant had like a particular clothing that he wore. So, he's not gonna be your servant at all, right? Tybalt tells Romeo, "Romeo, the love I bear thee can afford no better term than this. Thou art a villain. You're a villainous young man." And Romeo's response, he has to be nice. He's married to Juliet. He tells him, "The reason I have to love thee excuses much of the appertaining rage to this greeting. I'm not a villain. You don't know me," right? You shouldn't be mad at me at all, right? You don't understand me. You don't know me, and the reason why he doesn't know him is because he doesn't know that they're cousins. Tybalt's response, "Hey, this isn't going to excuse the injuries you've done to me. Therefore, turn and draw. Pull out your sword. We're going to fight." And here's the big line that ends it. Romeo says, "I do protest. I didn't injure you." Now, first of all, no, Romeo doesn't even know about the letter. He doesn't know what he's done wrong, right? He says, "I love thee better than thou canst devise." You can't even understand why I love you. And until you know the reason of my love, let's just end it here. He says, "And so, good Capulet, which name I value, I tender as dearly as my own, be satisfied." All right? Now, Mercutio jumps in. But he jumps in because he thinks Romeo is being like a dishonorable, almost like he's serving Tybalt. He really is acting like a servant because he doesn't have I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it, the sand, the grit to stand up against Tybalt. So Mercutio, as his friend, is going to save Romeo and jump in and fight. And so Tybalt wants to know from Mercutio, "What do you want from me?" And Mercutio says, "I just want one of your 9 lives." Because his name, Tybalt, remember we talked about the cat, the sly cat in the fable. Mercutio will call him a rat catcher. He will call him king of cats, right? And Tybalt, they end up fighting. Now, in the middle of the fight, Romeo and Benvolio are trying to break it up. Romeo at one point says, "General Mercutio, put thy rapier up." They're fighting with swords. Here's my sword fight. I just happen to have these 2 things here. So they're fighting with swords and they're going on. Well, what happens is Romeo says, "The prince has expressly forbid this banding in Verona streets. We shouldn't be fighting." But at one point, we're not really quite sure what happens. But what we think happens is, if this side is Mercutio and this side is Tybalt, Tybalt draws somehow, and Romeo must go in between the 2 of them, but facing Mercutio. Tybalt stabs Romeo, I can't even do it, underneath the arm, but imagine it's this arm. It goes underneath the arm and stabs Romeo, or stabs Mercutio. I think what happens is he leans in like this. They're parrying back and forth, and somehow when Romeo jumps in, Tybalt stabs Mercutio underneath Romeo's arm. The thing is, I don't know if it's purposeful, because the rule is you're going to die if you start a fight. In the movie, you'll see that Mercutio falls forward accidentally, and Romeo is like this, and then Tybalt's underneath, and he didn't do it on purpose. It would be hard to believe, but they are both hotheads, and so Mercutio will wound Tybalt will wound Mercutio and leave. Um, they think because Mercutio's kind of joking that it's maybe not that serious. It can't be that serious. And Mercutio says, no, it's not so wide as a church door, or wide as a well, nor so deep as a well, nor wide as a church door, but is enough. 'Twill serve. Ask for me tomorrow, and you'll find me a grave man. So he puns, because grave means he'll be serious, but grave means he's going to be dead. He'll be in the grave. And then he yells out a plague on both your houses. He yells it out twice because it's not just Romeo's house that causes, or Tybalt's house that causes him to die, but Romeo's house causes him to die. It's the feud that's going to kill Mercutio. Romeo says, I thought all for the best. And that's when Mercutio says, again, a plague on both your houses. They have made worms meat of me, right? He knows he's dead. Romeo can't believe it because he didn't really know what happens. At the beginning, when Mercutio's injured, he thinks he's just joking because that's what Mercutio does. But all of a sudden, he leaves. Benvolio helps Mercutio out, and Romeo says these lines. This gentleman, the prince is near alley, so he's a relative of Prince Aeschylus. My very friend hath got his mortal hurt in my behalf. Right? It's my fault. My reputation was stained by Tybalt, right? Tybalt that had an hour had been my kinsman. We've only been married an hour, so maybe it's 1:00, right? Well, maybe 1:30, because let's see, the nurse came at 12, Juliet ran out, maybe was at the priest by 12:30. Maybe it's now just like 1:00, 1:30. They've only been married for an hour. But he does say this line, Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate. You've turned me into like a girl. I'm not a very good fighter because you sort of intoxicated me. When Benvolio returns, he says, hey, Mercutio's spirit has aspired the clouds. Mercutio is up above our heads. And Romeo gives this one foreshadowing, or piece of foreshadowing. This day's black fate on more days doth depend. This but begins what the others must end. Okay? There's going to be more horrible things that are going to happen as a result of this. All right? When Tybalt returns, Romeo basically says, you're going to die, or I'm going to die, or both of us will die, and we will join Tybalt. They fight, Tybalt falls, right? And Benvolio says, get the heck out of here because the prince will kill you for killing Tybalt. And Romeo's lines, it's a famous line, maybe, the best line of the play thus far, I am fortune's fool. Fate is like playing with me. I'm like the plaything of fate. I'm trying to, like a marionette, that's all fate is doing, is playing with me. I didn't want any of this to happen, and here I've killed Juliet's cousin, and now I'm doomed to death. So he runs. All of a sudden, Lady Montague, Lord Capulet, Lady Capulet, they all show up, and the prince asks Benvolio to tell what happened. And Benvolio tells the truth. Like, Romeo didn't want it to happen, but Tybalt pushed. Mercutio jumped in. Mercutio died. Then Romeo defended Mercutio, and now Romeo killed Tybalt. Right? Lady Capulet says, hey, here's the deal. He is a kinsman to the Montague. Affection makes him false. He speaks not true. Of course, he's a friend of the Montagues. He's not telling the truth. Right? Prince says, Romeo slew him, meaning Tybalt, and Tybalt slew Mercutio, who now the price of his dear blood doth owe. Who's going to pay that forfeit of the peace? Lord Montague comes in and says, it can't be Romeo. He was Mercutio's friend, and what would have happened? Well, because Tybalt killed Mercutio, Tybalt would have died anyway, so why should we kill Romeo? And the prince says that's okay. For that offense, for killing Tybalt, we do exile him hence. If Romeo is ever seen in Verona again, that day is his last. And so Romeo is banished. And what that means is he can never show back up in Verona. He will have to leave. He will have to get out. He won't be able to see Juliet. He's now married. Nobody knows about it but the nurse Juliet and the friar. And now all of a sudden he's exiled. He can't ever come back to visit his family. another major complication. So, guys, that's the summary of what you read. Now, your homework for tomorrow, which is not tomorrow, which is going to be for Thursday, is going to be to read Act 3, Scenes 2 and 3, do the study questions that correspond on your Shakespeare sampler, and email them in to me. You're going to get credit for these study questions, and it should help you do well on the test that I'm going to give, and it should help you raise your grade. The only thing that I am going to tell you is, if your study questions look anything like anybody else's, I'm just giving you a straight 0. Some of you lost them on the previous study questions. You're not... these are not questions that I want you to work on together. I want you to work on them by yourselves, okay? I hope all is well. It shouldn't take you too long to get your homework done. And sorry for the dull video. Maybe I'll, I don't know, bring my dogs into the next video. Have a good one. Bye, guys.